Welcome to the FMCG, guys. I'm your co-host, Daniel Torres, joined by, surprise, surprise, my other co-host, Efrain Rosario. Hi, Efrain.
Hey, Daniel. How are you?
Very good, very good. One thing that we have in common, Efrain, is that, and I remember we talked about it when we first met in person in Amsterdam, that we concluded that one thing that we had in common, that we both like going for runs regularly.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you and I have talked about it several times that it's a great way to obviously get physical release, but also, emotionally and mentally, it's quite good as well. And it's also kind of a good way to network also, right? So you can find people to run with and carry on a conversation, and maybe you go grab a coffee afterwards as well.
Yeah. I don't know if I told you actually that I only started running after the lockdown.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Yeah, it was an interesting situation during the running and during lockdown. I don't know how it was for you, Daniel, but we had a certain radius around our physical address that we could run. So it definitely required more creativity, but it was a good way to get out and a good reason to get out for just to be out of your apartment, if nothing else.
Yeah, whenever we had a radius, you couldn't run. You could only go to the supermarket. When you could run, you had like a time limitation. So you had like a couple of times a day you could go out, like for 2 or 3 hours. In the afternoon when I went out, because in the morning it was too early for my taste, it looked like the Olympic Games on the Diagonal here in Barcelona. It was like full of people running. Me, one
Yeah.
of them actually, having no idea how to do it, but I stuck with it.
No, that's great. And it sounds like it's become a habit now for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I wouldn't be able to. I don't imagine a week without running. And actually, the running space has had like a boom post pandemic. So I think that my case is quite symptomatic and an example of what's happened in the category.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that particularly for us here in Europe, we're seeing it firsthand as well, in terms of some of the expansions that we're seeing in the retail space, both by, let's call it some of the bigger players, but also, I wouldn't say new players, but let's say people that specialize in the running space.
Yeah. And that's why today we have the head of international of one of these very fast growing brands in the running space, which is Brooks Running, headquartered in Seattle, Washington, and actually owned by Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett's fund. His name is Matthew Dodge, originally from the States, but has also lived in Asia and is currently based in Amsterdam. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well. Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Matt. Great to be with you today.
Yeah, likewise. I'm excited.
So, Matt, thanks for joining us again, and for the audience to get acquainted with you, even if we've said a bit about you in the intro. Can you tell us a bit about what you're currently doing at Brooks Running in Amsterdam?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Matt Dodge. I am the managing director of Brooks International, which is a bit of a mouthful. Essentially, though, my role is that I am the managing director for our EMEA business, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and for our Asia Pacific and Latin America business. So essentially, I lead our businesses ex-North America for Brooks.
Excellent. So basically, you have North America and then you. What the business you're managing?
Yes, that's a good way to think about it. Yes.
Excellent. And you're probably the only general manager I know, Matt, that started their career as a lawyer. That's like extremely uncommon. I don't know, Efrain, if you've come across somebody with that background.
I know one other person who's made that jump. He works in a completely different industry, though. So I'm very curious to hear Matt's story.
Yeah. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's a good one. So I would say I've taken the road less traveled to general management for sure. As you mentioned, Daniel, I started my career as a lawyer, and I was a corporate lawyer working in the technology space in Seattle. So I was doing a lot of technology transfer agreements, IP licensing, M&A work, and I was getting like really great broad business experience on the legal side. And that was a really solid foundation for me. I then also worked in a legal capacity in private equity in Singapore for a little bit as an attorney, also just supporting some IP licensing and pre-patented IP acquisitions across Asia Pacific. And that gave me a great exposure to working in a multicultural environment and a lot of learnings there. And then, I had this opportunity 9 years ago to come to Brooks to lead the legal function. And to be honest, it was a big departure from the trajectory that I had been on, which was much more big law and tech focused. But I'd been doing some work with Brooks for a little over a year. They were a client of the firm that I worked at. And I really liked the team. I loved the brand. I had this sense that Brooks had this really compelling opportunity for growth in front of them. And the idea of working closely with the leadership team and kind of carving my own path with the legal department was attractive. So, one thing I would say in these steps is that for me, when I've made these bigger career decisions, I usually make them from the perspective of experiences. What are the experiences that I want to have? And it was just an experience to come to Brooks that I couldn't pass up, even if it meant that I was going to be stepping off of that big law firm track. And it's been a great ride since then. In hindsight, it was an excellent choice for me. And it's given me this opportunity to kind of grow into a general management role. So a couple years after I started as the general counsel of Brooks, I had the opportunity to add responsibility for leading the HR function, which was really valuable for my development. I was immersed in the 360-degree view of our organizational strategy, and I learned so much about how the company operates, how the different functions see the world, and the complexity of org design. And so after about 5 years of that total experience across law and HR, I had the chance to come over to Amsterdam and become the managing director for our European business. And kind of going back to the start of my career, when I started in law, I had this idea that I would maybe really like to have this opportunity to transition into a business role at some point. I received my MBA when I was in law school, and I specifically went into corporate law as opposed to litigation for that reason. So when the opportunity came up at Brooks, I really jumped into it. And it was a natural progression for me a bit, because in my role as general counsel, I led the design and implementation of our wholesale distribution strategy in Europe. And that gave me this really grounding orientation into the complexity of the European markets. And I would say a head start in understanding how our business here works. And I was just super excited for that opportunity. And I've been here 5 years, and it's been a blast so far.
Yeah. Actually, out of curiosity, whenever I speak with people that come from consulting, for example, and go into a corporate role, especially when it's line management, one of the questions I always have is like, how was it from a leadership standpoint? Because when you're a consultant, you don't normally have that line management accountability that you have in corporate. Was it similar coming from a legal firm as well?
Absolutely. I think when you are outside counsel, you are really there to provide expertise, to provide advice, but ultimately the company is going to own the decisions that they make. And, that was something for me, actually, in my journey on the legal side. I really had this strong orientation of, man, wouldn't it be pretty cool to actually be making these decisions? It's really fun. I think it's a great foundation to work on the consulting side, and because you see a breadth of clients and you see a lot of different industries. And I think that wide exposure is really helpful when you're learning. But for me, there was something missing in the decision making and the ownership for it. And sometimes you don't know what the implications of those decisions are going to be for 1, 2, 3 years. And having time to sit in that leadership role and understand the cycle of the impact of the decisions that you make, that's something that I do gravitate to. So that was part of the attraction for me as well.
So, Matt, I feel like we've got a little bit of connection because we're both North Americans who are now living abroad here in Europe, and like you said, you also have lived and worked in Asia as well. And you referenced it earlier, which is I'm curious to hear about how that experience has been in terms of exposure to multiple cultures and being able to effectively manage across cultures, particularly in a role like you have, where you're in essence in charge of all the other markets outside of North America. I'm curious to hear about your journey and some of the learnings along the way.
Yeah, this is such a crucial and I think fascinating topic generally. I think I would start by saying the obvious, that working in a multicultural environment, it adds just a lot of dimension to the work. In our business here in Europe alone, we've got employees from over 25 countries, covering literally all the inhabited continents. And so we've got this really diverse team. And then, yes, we've got teams in Asia. I think when you consider the keys to successfully operating in a multicultural environment, regardless of where you are from, I think one of the primary keys is that you have to be curious and open. And that might sound obvious, but I think it's super foundational. And there's a couple sides to that coin. One, having a genuine interest in really learning about and understanding other cultures. So looking outward, how do people think? How do they communicate? How are decisions made? Are they top down? Are they made collectively? What do different cultures value? Is it a high context or a low context culture in terms of communication? How is negative feedback delivered, and how are conflicts managed? How should I interpret what's not being said? All these questions, you've got to, I think it's so critical to be really curious about that kind of map for the different cultures that you're working with. And then the other side to that coin is a willingness to really examine your own cultural programming and to look inward also. What cultural biases do I have? What are the potential blind spots and risks that I bring to the table when working with people from cultures that are different from my own? I think that also requires, curiosity and openness on both sides. And I can give you a tangible example of, where I've had some learnings and good experiences. So if you just take, for example, how negative feedback is delivered, I've found in several European cultures, not all of them, but in several of them, negative feedback is often framed first from the perspective of what is not working, right? That is the starting point. And it can be very direct and it can be to the point. And when I first moved over to Europe in 2018, I visited all of our offices in our markets here in Europe, and I was doing kind of a tour to get to know the team, get up to speed on the business. And in a couple of those meetings, I remember the team focused the meeting almost exclusively on a list of things that weren't working well. And as an American, that can be challenging. And it was for me at first, absolutely. And because I think, with in American business culture, I think there's a general bias towards framing challenges first as opportunities, right? Which, it has this inherently optimistic orientation. And there can be a relative aversion to starting with negative feedback, with direct negative feedback. And this relativity, because I think everything with culture, it's relative to some European cultures. That was a learning for me. So I had to learn how to process that approach. And, that learning required me to simultaneously think about, how is this negative feedback coming in? Gain awareness on my own wiring. In those meetings that I had in 2018, I remember one of them, halfway through that meeting, I kind of was trying to make a joke. I said, guys, I can't take any more good news, guys. It's just too much. But, if you don't do that work, and if you don't have that curiosity to kind of understand both where they're coming from and where your own biases are, it can really prevent you from understanding how to move forward. I think you can get stuck in an analysis of, oh, this team's always negative, and that's actually not really true. What you need to understand is it's an orientation. It doesn't literally mean everything's wrong. It's just where some people are going to start. But I think it's so important that you put that work in to do the understanding.
Absolutely.
I love the part. Sorry, friend. Love the part of high context and low context as well, right? Especially when you're a general manager and you have to delegate so much. Like in the south of Europe, we normally talk like very broadly, right, about things. Whereas in the north of Europe, in Germany, for example, they're very literal about things. So all these little details, I guess, you have to learn about as well as you go, no?
Yeah, absolutely, you do. And you have to understand how your language is going to be received by different people. I think what my colleagues would poke fun at with Americans at times, and I enjoy it because I think we have to be careful not to take ourselves too seriously, is, we always say everything's great or everything's awesome or everything's an opportunity. And, for some cultures, that actually doesn't land as very authentic or genuine, right? And so I think you need to just be mindful of that. And you have to put in the work. You have to spend real energy thinking about how your message is going to be delivered, how to interpret other communication. And this is all on top of your day job. So I think just coming back to that point for me around the curiosity and openness, if you don't have that, the energy that you need to put in to understanding how to operate effectively, if you're not open and curious about it, I think it's going to feel more draining than it is going to feel affirming or stimulating. And I think that's a dangerous place to be. So I think you have to be open. And, the rewards are big if you actually do have the right orientation towards it. You're going to go through a learning curve. You're going to make mistakes. But if you do spend that time, you gain a better and deeper understanding of different cultures. The payoff's huge. I think you can have tremendous personal growth. I think you reduce your blind spots. You see the world more holistically. You see your home culture through a different lens, and it lets you build great relationships with people who come from different places. And I think that's really fun. But you got to be up for the work.
Yeah, actually, there's a great book by Aaron Meyer, who's a INSEAD professor, The Culture Map, that I just picked it up at the library because I wanted to reread it. Because of exactly what you're describing and just some of the things that I'm working on in my day to day. So it's good to hear, like you said, it's hear similar stories and similar experiences that you've kind of encountered along the way as well.
Yeah, that's a great book. I've read it as well. Actually, I read it the first year I moved here, and then after I read it, I was so impressed with the clarity of how she distills these complex topics and the practicality of it. I actually bought it for our entire leadership team here, just to give everyone an opportunity, because even within Europe, take away me as an American, it's a dynamic here in and of itself, right? Because Europe is a collection of multiple different cultures that have deep differences.
Yeah, headhunting across Europe, I learned the hard way. So across Europe and in the US as well, which is also a different story. We should probably do a podcast around that, Efrain, around the different communication styles and ways of doing business and socializing in Europe.
Absolutely.
But anyway, I digress. Going back to Brooks, Matt, because Brooks, I don't know if it's is it the number one running shoe in the US right now?
Yeah, in performance running, we are number one, yes.
Yeah, so the number one in performance running in the US, but I think that in Europe, or at least here in Barcelona and Catalonia, it's still like a challenger and an up-and-coming brand. And I know that one of the unique things it has is that apart from being very category specific, you're also privately owned. So a bit of a different company in the ecosystem. Maybe can you tell us a bit about Brooks, where you guys come from and how you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm biased, but I think the Brooks story is really special and it's actually kind of undertold. Brooks is quite an old company. We over 100 years old, actually. Founded in 1914 in Philadelphia. And it was initially the roots of the company were in all categories in sporting goods with in-house manufacturing. So Brooks made everything from football cleats to ice skates, you name it. And through time, the company migrated west across the US from Philadelphia to Michigan and then eventually to the Seattle area. And kind of fast forwarding a little bit, in the 1970s, there was a really big running boom that started in the US. And Brooks was right in the middle of that. And we brought at the time some shoes to the market that were really cutting edge from a technology perspective. So Brooks has got very deep roots in performance running. But as a business, it remained multi-category for almost all of the 20th century. And I would say actually in the 1980s and 90s, the business kind of floundered and wasn't really thriving. A lot of lower price point goods, profitability was challenging. And in 2001, Brooks made this kind of watershed decision to pivot to an exclusive focus on performance running. It was a really big shift. At that time, we were doing a lot of things relatively poorly. I would say we weren't a top brand in any one category. The company was losing money, wasn't very big. The revenue was around 50 to 60 million globally. And, we decided to put all of our energy into trying to do one thing really well. And at the time, Brooks had a couple of strong styles on the performance running side. And we just went all in on that. And since that point, the brand has been, it's not an overstatement to say, completely rebuilt. Went from about a 50 to 60 million revenue business at that time to last year being over 1.1 billion. So we've had a 15+% compounded annual growth rate over 20 years. Really sustained success. And as you guys, I'm sure know, moving a brand up the value chain, right, and winning over performance-focused customers is no small task. Runners are really discerning. They need to have confidence that their gear will enable a great run for them every time that they lace up. So, this journey that we've been on the last 20 years is really special. And actually we're still in the early days of it. So, that's kind of the starting point of getting us kind of where we are today. But what I would say is at the heart of the success that we've had over the last 20 years and that we continue to have is that we've just got this constant focus on runners. Brooks exists to inspire people to run their path, and everything we do is in service of this purpose. And it comes to life in a lot of different ways. It comes to life with product. When we build running shoes, our efforts are grounded in this desire to solve for, one, the biomechanical needs of runners, but also to enable them to have more choice in the experience they want. And then secondly, we've got this celebratory brand positioning that's really all about your run. We want to celebrate every person's run. For some people, it's about achieving a personal best or, being really competitive. But for other people, it's about finding that space to recharge, take some me time, and there's nothing competitive about it at all. And it's a wide spectrum of benefit that the run can offer. And for Brooks, this combination of really serious performance gear with a brand ethos that celebrates your individual run and is really, fun loving and joyful, I think it's special. And yeah, so that's a little bit of a background on who we are.
So Matt, you'll be hopefully glad to hear that I had a great experience in store when I bought my last pair of shoes. Actually, I ended up buying 2 pairs of Brooks shoes at a running store in Hyannis when I was in the US over the summer. And a lot of what you're describing is what the salesperson was able to, in essence, convey to me in regards to a little bit about the history, but also, like you said, this focus on performance running and like you're saying, my individual run, and making it so that it was something that, I explained to him what I was looking for in terms of, I was going to be running a couple races in the fall. I needed this. And he said, well, for this run, you probably, you want, for these shorter runs, you want this. For these longer runs, you may want something a little bit different. But it really started to come through. And I was really interested to hear you're talking about both in essence like the brand ethos and also almost like the strategic focus. And can you tell us a little bit more how that has kind of in essence come to life in terms of your go-to-market strategy? And I guess specifically I'm thinking about, not just that experience in those individual running stores, but thinking about it more through an omni-channel lens.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of pulling the string on what I was just talking about in terms of the brand positioning and our broader strategy, when you think about the go-to-market strategy, it's similar in the starting point, which is we start with the runner. We're a specialist brand. It's all we do is running. So we need to think about the runner through the full spectrum of what we focus on. And when we specifically get into go-to-market, the way we think about it is our aim is to create this interconnected ecosystem, which is designed to enable the runner to have an amazing experience with our brand and to easily buy and learn and research our product wherever they want within our network, right? And that network includes our own direct website, but it largely is comprised of retailers, both specialists like the ones that you just talked about, Efrain, and general sporting goods players. And I think what's really important to understand with this is that the design for this interconnected ecosystem, it's informed by our point of view that the runner is actually in charge. Brands don't own the runner, the relationship with the runner, and neither do retailers. The runner is going to research, they're going to shop, and they're going to buy wherever they want. And they've got complete autonomy over their journey. And their journey, we've done a lot of research on this. It's usually going to include both digital and physical touch points, right? So, one time you may see a brand that you like in your social feed and you might immediately go to buy it. Another time you might do a lot of research. You might go in store to try it on, get some advice on fit, and then decide. It's a really complicated and messy journey, and it can be different runner to runner or even session to session, but the key is that it's your journey. So for us, a key implication to that is that our go-to-market strategy doesn't start first with a focus on channel. We start with the runner and then we layer channel on top of that, not the other way around. And I think when you build your network around the runner, it helps you clearly define the role different touch points have within your ecosystem. So with one touch point, you might be focused more on driving sales. Through another, you're focused on engagement and brand affinity and the like. But it's omni-channel through and through in the sense that we don't actually care where within our network the runner buys. We just want you to have a great experience. And as long as it's within our network so we can ensure the right level of service and support and that you have a good experience, we're going to win. And so it's a really, that's our point of view on it. It's a challenging strategy to execute in the sense that you need to have really great communication across a lot of different functional teams. But I think it's also a really rewarding platform to build out because it's runner centric, and you're putting the runner right at the center of the thinking.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything you're saying with regards to, like you said, it's it can be hard in terms of making the transition as a company in terms of like taking the view from shifting from that channel view to more of the consumer, in your case, the runner view. But it's the upside, the benefits of it are significant and worth pursuing. So I would love to ask more about this just because I think there's a lot of shared passions around that point around omni-channel, but I'll keep us moving on. So over to you, Daniel.
Well, I'm just thinking of when you talked about like the experience of a run. Like I run every week, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 times. And I met up with a friend on Saturday, like in the morning, it was sunny, like, I don't know, a bit below 20 degrees. And we ran up the hills and, you can see Barcelona from the hills, the sea, the buildings, everything. And it's like such a great experience when you think about it as well. No? And just having that comfort of being able to do that with the right equipment is like a great experience, no? And
yeah, it's fantastic, Daniel. I mean, I think the run can give you so much. I mean, we really believe that that a day with the run, it can make your day better. It can make your life better. And activity and exercise are so foundational to, I think, a well-rounded, healthy life. How lucky are we? And I think we talk about this as a team all the time, that we get to work in a space where if we do our jobs well, we're promoting more activity, which gives physical, mental, psychological benefit.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the run is just a powerful, powerful giver. And that's a North Star for us. So it's great to hear that story because, again, it can be different for everyone. People have different goals, they get different things out of it, but everyone who engages with the sport and with the activity, they benefit. So I'm glad to hear you both get a lot out of running.
Yeah. And when the last time I went to buy running shoes, I went to this store which was like multi-brand, but it's like specialized in running shoes. Anyway, I went there. I told the guy at the store what I needed, etc. And he ended up recommending me a pair of Brooks as well. Is that a coincidence, Matt?
Well, look, I think it just shows he's got great judgment, right? No, no. So it's specialists are a critical channel in the running market generally, and absolutely within our ecosystem. So again, it starts with the runner, right? And a lot of runners, especially people who are starting out or who may be getting back into running after a hiatus, a lot of runners visit specialty running stores to seek out fitting expertise. Because it's critical. I think most people know this, even if they're new, that you've got the right shoe that matches your unique need. And especially for people new to running, that process can be a little daunting to try to find the right gear for you, right? How do I choose? We all have different gaits. Our bodies move with unique habitual motion paths. And it's not an easy thing to kind of get that sorted. So running specialists, they've been curating the best running products and providing local expertise for a long, long time. So when a runner like you, Daniel, when you go to a specialist and you get great service and advice, that's going to lead to a confident purchase, and it's ultimately going to lead to a great experience on the run. So the specialists have a huge impact on influencing purchase. And for us as a brand that is rooted in biomechanics, right, who's bringing product to market with the explicit promise of delivering a fit, feeling ride that's going to help you get the most out of your run and to kind of confidently get out there and be out there kilometer after kilometer, that specialty channel, it's critical because it's where we can partner with local businesses to help people find the right solutions for their needs. And I can't tell you how many times I've had friends, acquaintances, even family members tell me the same story you've told me, where they go to a specialist and it just leads to a good experience. And so, it's absolutely a critical channel.
It's interesting because it also it's a bit countercultural right now in a way, no? Because we keep on talking about going online and building that online brand experience, but your value proposal or this way of influencing the consumers actually existed for centuries, no?
Yeah, it absolutely is been around for a while. And I think, though, that's the beauty of being runner-led, is because, digital is really important. And I think for every brand that's consumer facing, building out a robust and comprehensive digital strategy to engage with runners and drive online sales is key. But when you're focused on starting your thinking around where are runners going and where can you engage with them accurately, it helps you, stay focused on finding these spaces which you're not going to read in the newspaper, about trends in small brick and mortar the way you are digital, but it's absolutely a place where runners continue to go because it's a value add. People get a big benefit out of that, and it's inherently local. So, yeah, it's been around for a long time.
No, absolutely. And I think it goes back to the points you were making earlier with regards to, really looking at it through an omni-channel lens and understanding that every one of those experiences or every one of those moments on the runner's journey, as long as it's adding some sort of value and it's engaging with them, then it's a net positive.
Yeah.
Right. And it may be that it doesn't get fulfilled through digital or doesn't get fulfilled through the specialist, but as long as it's a positive experience and engagement, then it's a win, especially for the runner.
Yeah, exactly. And if it's a win for the runner, and it's something I talk about with our teams all the time, all the boats are going to rise, right? It's going to be good for the specialists. It's going to be good for the digital channel. And, it's very infrequent in my experience that this omni-channel focus ends up having a negative impact on any specific channel. Because at the end of the day, if your brand if you're doing a good job engaging with consumers and runners in our case to bring them into the brand and give them a great experience, they're going to attach themselves to multiple touch points, and they don't care about that though. They just want to have the experience they want to have. But all the boats rise in this scenario.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, this has been, I think I'm confident speaking for Daniel. This has been a great conversation. And I don't know about you, Daniel, but I'm raring to get, my Brooks on and go out for a run later today after this discussion. I do have one last question to ask you. And this is a question that we ask all of our guests, which is that, given again, the breadth of your career, spanning across Asia, North America, and now Europe. What one piece of advice would you give to your younger self when you were first starting out your career back in corporate law?
Yeah, that's a great question. Giving advice on career, I've always found a little tricky because I don't think there's a one size fits all approach. And, I think part of being early in your career is that you don't necessarily have the benefit of hindsight and of experience, and you kind of need to go through things to learn. And I'm also not confident that the version of me today would be able to get the younger me to listen well. But that being said, what I would say is that what I'd say to myself is early in your career, focus more on learning and less on where you want to be in 5 years. If you are in a role where you have supportive management and you're learning at a high rate and developing your ability to problem solve and think critically, that is a good place to be. Because you can't know, I don't think, exactly where it will lead you, but it will become a platform upon which you can continue to grow in multiple directions. And conversely, if you're not learning, run, don't walk to something else. And spend less time thinking about where you want to be in 5 years. And I think there's a few reasons that I would tell myself that is one, I think I've learned this. I think it's extremely hard to chart out that course accurately. So many things can and do happen. So I think putting too much energy in that is not very productive. And second, if you are really fixated on a specific destination at a specific time, I think you're going to introduce material risk that you're closing yourself off to emergent opportunities that are going to come along the way, which you have no way of anticipating. And so I think, it's great to have a directional guide that you might want to pursue, but I think it's really dangerous if you get too fixated on that because you're gonna close yourself off to things that come up, and things come up if you're learning, if you're developing problem solving skills, if you're developing analytical skills, communication skills, things are going to come up. It's a big world. There's a lot of cool things to do. And so I think if you're focused on those things, I would tell myself you're going to be just fine, and don't worry too much about where it takes you. It's going to be a fun journey.
This was Matthew Dodge, Head of International for Brooks Running. What a great conversation, Ephraim.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, but as we said before, with both you and I being not just runners, but also Brooks consumers or Brooks runners, a lot to learn from Matthew.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't, and as I said yesterday, I won't stop repeating it, as I said before, sorry, I won't stop repeating the fact that somebody coming from legal and then double that with HR, becoming a general manager of a region is pretty unique.
He's only the second person I've heard who's made that jump. And as I mentioned in the conversation, the other person was in a completely different industry. So in FMCG, I think it's pretty rare to find somebody with Matt's career trajectory.
Yeah. What other takeaways do you have from this conversation, Efrain?
I really enjoyed listening to Matt's perspective in regards to not just the fact, like you said, that he came from a legal background into more of a general manager, but his experience as a North American and being able to effectively manage and lead in a multinational culture or environment. I think, there's a lot of great learnings from what Matt shared with us around being curious and coming into the situation both open-minded, but also, willing to, in essence, look internally as well in regards to some of the biases that we ourselves have in regards to our cultural upbringing. So lots of interesting comments there, and he mentioned culture mapping and the Culture Map book by Professor Aaron Meyer. So we'll put a note in on that if people want to check out that book as well. It's a great read. So I really enjoyed that part of our conversation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also one thing that I really liked, because it's like almost countercultural today, the fact of like the importance that they give to the role of the specialist in store. So that like word of mouth, that person to person contact as like really a key driver of growth for them, for me was super interesting, because as I said before, we're always talking about digital and marketing and so on, which is great, but also having that person that recommends you the product, I think super interesting.
No doubt. And I think that it really ties into the point that he was making around putting the runner at the center and really thinking about all the different touch points in that ecosystem being interconnected to one another. So, obviously D2C plays a role, as does social media and other digital touch points. But that's not to say that, like you said, the role of the specialist isn't really, really important as well, in terms of, like you said, providing that expert advice, especially people who are new to running and really need that, right? In terms of being able to kind of decipher what's the best shoe or product for them.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like ultimately, if you follow that logic, it has like a benefit to the runner, right? Which is the whole purpose of the brand, which is great. I also like the fact, since we're runners, the fact of like really like enjoying the experience of the run per se as like an ends per se, and not only a means to an end, like enjoying the run and the sensations that it gives you, right?
Yeah, and I think we didn't really touch on it, but you could see that Matt really embodies that part of the brand ethos for Brooks as well. Just in terms of how he was articulating exactly that, which is it's about running your path and it's about your run, right? And making sure that we recognize that we as the runner are kind of at the center of everything that Brooks does. And obviously, I think there's a lot of learnings there for other brands as well in regards to making sure that the consumer, or in this case, the runner, is really at the core of everything they do. Yeah, absolutely. Very good. Well, thanks, Efrain, for the conversation again. Thanks to our audience as well for listening. Remember, please to follow us on LinkedIn if you're not yet. A lot of upcoming content coming. Very excited about that. You can also find us now on YouTube. Our episodes, in theory, should be all uploaded by now. So you can find us there as well. And yeah, thanks for following us again and listening to us. And we'll see you in the next episode of the FMCG Guys.